It was my 70th birthday, and all I wanted was a simple family gathering. I spent the entire week preparing, cooking my son's favorite dishes, decorating the dining room, setting the table with my best china, and carefully selecting a birthday cake. But when the day came, something was off. The house felt eerily empty. I waited by the door, checking my phone every few minutes, expecting a call or a message from my son and his wife. But nothing came. It was supposed to be a joyous occasion, a moment for my family to come together and celebrate, but all I was left with was a deafening silence. I was just about to sit down when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my son. "Sorry, Mom. We can't make it today. Hope you understand." My heart sank as I read the message. My son, the one I had raised and cared for, just forgot. No explanation, no apology, just a cold, impersonal text. I stood there in the middle of the room holding my phone, staring at the empty chairs. That was when it hit me. I wasn't just forgotten. I was being dismissed, cast aside as if I were some inconvenience. The worst part? I had been so excited for this day, thinking we could finally reconnect. Instead, I was left alone, abandoned, and invisible. To make matters worse, when I checked social media later, there they were, my son and daughter-in-law, smiling on a beach vacation. How could they do this to me? How could they leave me behind on my birthday, the one day that was supposed to matter? I was devastated. But what I didn't know was that this was just the beginning. This was only the first betrayal. And it would soon become clear just how deep the lies and deceit ran within my family. But what I did next would change everything. Stay with me, and let's uncover the truth together. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the shocking twists ahead. I stood there in the kitchen, the aroma of my favorite birthday dish filling the air, and yet it didn't bring me any comfort. I stared at the empty chairs around the table, each one a painful reminder of what I thought would be a joyful day. I was so used to hosting these family dinners, always the one to make sure everyone had their favorite foods, to create a sense of warmth and togetherness. But this year it felt like no one even cared enough to show up. My son's text had been the final blow, a cold reminder that the family I'd built was slipping through my fingers. I sat down at the table alone, my heart heavy with disappointment. As I picked up my phone, I noticed I had missed a call from my sister, Ruth. I hadn't heard from her in days, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I called her back, trying to mask the pain in my voice. "Hey Ruth, I'm just sitting here. I'm fine, really." There was a long pause before she spoke, her voice soft, hesitant. "Loretta, I don't want to upset you, but you need to know something." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I didn't know it yet, but this conversation would change everything. She told me she had seen my son and daughter-in-law at a restaurant the previous weekend, laughing, holding hands, acting like they were the perfect couple. But what really hit me was what Ruth said next. "They've been planning something behind your back, Loretta. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it doesn't look good." My world shifted in that moment. The love I had for my son, the hope that he would always be there for me, seemed to be slipping away. But there was still a part of me, a small part, that refused to believe it. I didn't want to admit that the family I'd worked so hard to create, the family I had always put first, was falling apart. Later that evening, I went to my computer and opened up social media. The first thing that caught my eye was a photo of my son and daughter-in-law. It was taken on a beach, them looking so happy, so carefree. But it wasn't just the picture that struck me. It was the caption. "Celebrating life and love, just the two of us." I felt the walls close in around me. I had been left out. Not just on my birthday, but in their lives altogether. I didn't want to believe it, but it was becoming clear that I had been excluded, erased from the family I had built. As I scrolled through the comments, I felt a mixture of betrayal and disbelief. Why hadn't they told me? Why hadn't they even thought to include me? I closed my laptop and sat in silence, letting the weight of it all wash over me. I had been a mother, a wife, a grandmother, and yet in their eyes, I was nothing more than an afterthought. I didn't know what I was supposed to do next. The pain was unbearable, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't let this slide. I had spent my life giving, loving, and sacrificing for them, and now it was my turn to stand up for myself. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had been hit with a ton of bricks. My chest was heavy, and the weight of the previous day's events lingered in my mind. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just a misunderstanding, that maybe my son and daughter-in-law were too busy to join me. But deep down I knew that wasn't the truth. They had left me at the airport on my birthday. And it wasn't just the abandonment, it was the coldness of it. They didn't even offer to help me get back home. It was like I didn't exist in their lives anymore. As I sat in my kitchen sipping my coffee, I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I would take control of my own life. I wouldn't wait around for them to come back and apologize. I would go out and find the answers myself. I started by calling my lawyer. I didn't know what my next move was going to be, but I wasn't going to let them push me around. My lawyer was surprised to hear from me but assured me that they could help. "We'll figure this out, Loretta," she said. "But you need to know one thing. This isn't just about a birthday party or a phone call. You have rights and it's time you start asserting them." Her words struck a chord with me. It had been so long since I had stood up for myself. I had spent years taking care of everyone else and now it was my turn. As the day went on, I couldn't help but feel a mix of sadness and anger. How could they do this to me? How could they treat me like this after everything I had done for them? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't need them. I had my own life to live, and it was time I started living it for myself. That evening I went out for a walk in the park, hoping to clear my head. The weather was crisp, and the falling leaves reminded me that change was in the air. As I walked, I passed a group of people laughing and enjoying their evening, and it hit me, I had once been part of that. I had been full of life, surrounded by people who cared. But now all of that felt like a distant memory. I stopped by a bench and sat down, letting the quiet settle around me. It was then that I made a promise to myself. I wasn't going to be a passive victim of this situation. I would fight for my place in this world. And if my family wasn't going to include me, then I would find new people to share my life with. As the sun began to set, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. It was time to move on. I would no longer allow my son and daughter-in-law to control my happiness. I would take back my life one step at a time. The next few days were a blur. I kept thinking about what Ruth had told me and how everything suddenly felt like a bad dream. The realization that my own son and daughter-in-law were hiding something from me kept eating away at my mind. I was used to being the rock for my family, always the one to hold everything together, but now I felt like I was crumbling alone. I spent the following morning organizing old photos in my living room. I used to do this with my husband, Noel, on quiet Sunday afternoons. But now it was just me. As I flipped through the pictures, I couldn't help but think of all the times I had sacrificed for my family. I had given so much, yet now I was left with nothing but empty spaces in my house and in my heart. My phone rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was my lawyer, and for the first time in a long while I felt a flicker of hope. "Loretta, I think it's time we take the next step. Your son and daughter-in-law need to understand that what they've done has consequences." I knew then that I couldn't sit back anymore. I had to act, and I had to act now. That afternoon, I decided to pay a visit to the community center I had been hearing about. I'd seen advertisements for it, and it seemed like a good fit for someone like me. Someone who had been forgotten and was looking for a new place to belong. When I arrived, I was greeted with smiles and a sense of warmth that I hadn't felt in a long time. There were people there my age, some even older, but they were all laughing and enjoying themselves. It was such a contrast to the loneliness I had been feeling. I sat down at one of the tables and started chatting with a few of the members. They were kind, understanding, and surprisingly lively. It felt good to be around people who didn't judge me or treat me like I was invisible. For the first time in a while, I felt like I was part of something. The visit lifted my spirits, and as I walked out of the community center, I felt lighter. Maybe this was the fresh start I needed. I didn't have to depend on my son and daughter-in-law anymore. I had my own life to live, and it was time to make the most of it. That evening, I sat down and wrote a letter to my son, explaining everything I had been feeling. I poured my heart into it, telling him how hurt I was by his actions, how I had always been there for him, and how I never imagined he would treat me this way. I didn't expect him to reply right away. In fact, I didn't even know if he would read it. But I knew that I had to say my piece. I had to stand up for myself. I sealed the letter and placed it in the mailbox. As I watched the letter disappear into the slot, I realized that no matter what happened, I had taken control. I wasn't going to be silenced anymore. A few days passed, and as I went about my routine, I felt a growing sense of determination. The community center had given me something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. I started attending their activities regularly, meeting new people and learning new things. It felt so freeing, like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I found myself smiling more, even laughing at the jokes that were told. The people there didn't treat me like a burden, they treated me like a person. But there was still a nagging feeling in the back of my mind, something I couldn't shake. My son and daughter-in-law. I hadn't heard from them since I sent the letter. I wasn't sure what I expected, but I couldn't help but wonder if they would even acknowledge what had happened. One afternoon, as I was getting ready to leave for the community center, the doorbell rang. I opened the door, half expecting to find a delivery person or a neighbor, but to my surprise, it was my son, David. He stood there, his hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Mom, can we talk?" I nodded and stepped aside, letting him in. We sat down in the living room, and I could feel the tension between us. David looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and frustration. "I've been thinking about what you wrote in your letter," he began. "And I know I messed up." His words, though small, hit me harder than I expected. I had spent so many days convincing myself that he would never understand, that he would never apologize, but here he was acknowledging what he had done. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said, his voice quiet but sincere. "I was wrong to treat you like that. I didn't realize how much it hurt you." I listened, but inside I wasn't sure how to react. A part of me wanted to forgive him right there, to brush everything under the rug and go back to how things were. But another part of me, the part that had finally started standing up for herself, knew better. "It's not just about the birthday, David," I said, my voice steady. "It's about the way I've been treated for years. The way your wife and sometimes you have dismissed me. I've always been there for you, but you never gave me the same in return." David's face fell, and I could see the shame in his eyes. "I know, Mom. I've been selfish. I've taken you for granted, and I'm so sorry for that." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his apology, but also feeling a deep sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just the one giving. I wasn't the one carrying the family. For once, it felt like the scales were tipping in my favor. But as much as his apology meant to me, I knew that things wouldn't change overnight. Trust takes time to rebuild, and I wasn't going to let my guard down too easily. "I appreciate your apology, David," I said, my voice softer now. "But it's going to take more than words to fix this. I need to see that you really understand." He nodded, looking humbled. "I will, Mom. I'll do whatever it takes." We sat there for a moment, the silence between us no longer uncomfortable, but filled with the possibility of healing. I knew that it would take time, that there would be bumps along the way, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone anymore. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for us to rebuild our relationship. Weeks passed after David's visit, and things began to settle into a quiet routine. My life was still changing, but it felt different now, more in my control. I continued attending the community center, enjoying the activities and getting to know more people. I wasn't relying on anyone but myself, and for the first time in years, that felt good. I knew I had to focus on myself and not be dependent on others to make me feel worthy. But every now and then a thought would creep into my mind. Would my son really change? Would my daughter-in-law ever truly understand how much she had hurt me? The unanswered questions lingered in the background of my thoughts. It wasn't until one Sunday afternoon that the next chapter in this story began to unfold. I was sitting in the living room sipping my tea when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I hesitated. When I opened the door, there stood my daughter-in-law, Romy, her face a mask of uncertainty. "Loretta, can we talk?" she asked, her voice tentative. I felt my heart skip a beat. I hadn't seen her in weeks, not since the day they had left me at the airport. I had no idea what this meeting would bring. I stepped aside to let her in, my mind racing. As she sat down, I noticed how different she looked. She wasn't the confident, controlling woman I had known before. Instead, she seemed almost vulnerable. "I know I've hurt you," she began, her voice low. "And I know I can never take back what I've done. But I want you to know that I'm truly sorry." I studied her for a moment, unsure of what to say. It wasn't like her to apologize. Romy had always been someone who made decisions without considering anyone else, least of all me. And yet here she was sitting in front of me offering an apology. I wasn't sure if I should believe it, but I couldn't deny the sincerity in her eyes. Why now? I asked, my voice steady but cautious. Why come to me after everything that's happened? Romy took a deep breath, looking down at her hands. I've realized I've been selfish, she said quietly. I was focused on my own desires, and I never considered how my actions affected you. I've seen how much you've done for this family, and I can't pretend like I didn't know that. I've been wrong. Her words caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting this level of honesty, this vulnerability from her. I had always believed she was too proud to admit her mistakes. But here she was, acknowledging what she had done. I paused, letting her words sink in. I don't know if I can forgive you right now, I said finally, my voice soft but firm. But I appreciate that you came here and said this. It's a start. Romy nodded, her eyes filled with gratitude. I understand, she said, standing up. I just want you to know that I'm trying to make things right, however long it takes. As she left, I felt a strange sense of closure. Maybe things could be different between us. Maybe, in time, we could rebuild what had been broken. But for now, I wasn't ready to fully let go of the hurt. I had to protect myself first. And that, I realized, was the most important thing I had learned through all of this. I didn't need anyone else's approval to feel worthy. I was enough just as I was. A few days later, I found myself at the community center again. The laughter and chatter around me had become something I looked forward to. It was strange how quickly I had found solace in the company of strangers, how easily they accepted me without any of the emotional baggage I had carried for years. But as much as I was enjoying my newfound independence, there was still something I had to face. I had to make peace with my son and daughter-in-law. They were my family, and despite everything, I couldn't just erase them from my life. It was a Saturday afternoon when David called. I had been expecting this call, but I wasn't sure what to expect from it. When I answered, his voice was softer than it had been in the past. Mom, can we meet? I want to talk. I took a deep breath, feeling the tension in my chest. I didn't want to meet him at first, but deep down I knew it was something that needed to happen. I agreed, and we set a time to meet at a local cafe. When I arrived, David was already sitting at a corner table, his eyes downcast. He looked different somehow, smaller, like the weight of everything that had happened was finally starting to catch up with him. I sat down across from him, and for a moment, neither of us said anything. The silence was thick, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was as if we were both waiting for the right words to break through the stillness. Finally, David spoke. I've been thinking a lot about everything, Mom. I know I hurt you, and I know I can't fix the past, but I want to try. I want to make things right between us. I listened, trying to read his face, trying to find the sincerity in his words. I don't know how to make up for what I did, he continued. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. I want to rebuild what we had, even if it takes time. I nodded slowly. His words, while heartfelt, didn't immediately heal the wounds. It would take time for me to trust again, but hearing him speak so openly was a step in the right direction. I appreciate that, David, I said, my voice steady. But trust isn't something that comes overnight. You have to prove to me that you're willing to change, not just for me but for yourself. He nodded, his eyes full of determination. I understand, Mom. I will prove it to you. We talked for a while longer about the past, about what had gone wrong, and what we both needed to do moving forward. By the time we parted ways, I didn't feel like all the pain was gone, but I felt a small glimmer of hope. For the first time in a long time, I was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. The healing process wouldn't be easy, but at least now there was a chance. The weeks that followed were quieter than I had expected, but in a good way. David kept his word. He came by regularly to check in, spending more time with me, helping me around the house, and most importantly, listening. He hadn't been perfect, but he was trying. The small gestures meant more to me than I had anticipated, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was being seen again. Romy too had changed. She began calling me more often, asking how I was doing and inviting me over for dinners. It was awkward at first, but I could sense her sincerity. She was making an effort, and so was I. It wasn't easy. There were still days when the old pain resurfaced, moments when I wanted to lash out or retreat into myself. But something was different. I had learned to set boundaries, to express my feelings, and to demand the respect I deserved. David and I began to rebuild our relationship brick by brick. We had conversations we should have had years ago about the past, about my hurt, about what had gone wrong. It wasn't always easy, and sometimes it felt like we were stuck in a loop of apologies and regrets, but each time we talked, we got a little closer to understanding each other. One evening, as we sat in the kitchen, just the two of us, David turned to me and said, "Mom, I don't want you to feel like you have to take care of everything anymore. You've done enough. It's my turn now." Those words hit me harder than I expected. For the first time, I realized that he truly understood the weight of what I had carried all these years. I felt a rush of emotion, a mixture of relief and gratitude, but also a deep sadness for the time lost. I had spent so many years pouring my love and energy into everyone else, but now it was my turn to take care of myself. I wasn't alone anymore. I had finally found my voice, and with it, I was starting to create a life for myself that wasn't defined by others' expectations or neglect. As I looked out the window that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I realized that healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about learning to live with it, to find peace in it. I had faced the pain, I had stood up for myself, and now I was learning how to move forward. The journey wasn't over, but I was no longer the same person who had felt so lost and invisible months ago. I was stronger now, and no matter what happened next, I knew I had the power to shape my own future. Months had passed since David and I had started rebuilding our relationship. Things were not perfect, but they were better. It was strange how much had changed in such a short time. I had learned to put myself first, to stop waiting for validation from others. My relationship with David and Romy had been through its ups and downs, but we were making progress. There were still moments of tension, but there was also a newfound respect between us. I had learned that forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant moving forward, accepting the past, and allowing myself to heal. And so, I continued to build my life one day at a time. I spent more time at the community center, volunteering and connecting with people who appreciated me for who I was, not for what I could give them. I had found a sense of purpose outside of my family. It was freeing. But there were still days when I missed the way things used to be. The family dinners, the laughter, the love I had given so freely. It wasn't easy to let go of those memories, but I had come to realize that I couldn't keep holding on to the past. The future was what mattered now. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset, I thought about all the changes I had made in my life. I had taken control of my own happiness, learned to set boundaries, and finally felt like I had a voice. I looked out at the horizon, feeling a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. I had come a long way from the woman who had felt invisible and alone. I had learned that my worth was not determined by the actions of others, and that I had the power to shape my own future. It wasn't always easy, but it was worth it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a quiet sense of contentment wash over me. The journey had been long, and there were still challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face them. I had my life back, and that was enough. It made me wonder, how many of us spend years giving to others, losing ourselves along the way, only to realize that the key to our happiness was inside us all along? Have you ever felt like you've been forgotten by the people you love? How did you find your way back to yourself? Thank you for watching our video. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new stories.